All right, let's talk about Hunter Biden. It's getting more interesting. The Wall Street Journal with some in-depth reporting this week on what's actually happening there. And it's not just a matter of this guy who was on drugs, who was just a hot mess. He's appeared to cross some legal lines, though that's under investigation. It's the U.S. Attorney for Delaware. He worked in this office during both the Bush and the Obama administrations and was nominated to run it by Donald Trump. So he's been there under, Dems, Republicans, and so on. This began as a tax inquiry during the Obama administration, and then it widened in 2018 to include possible criminal violations of tax laws, as well as foreign lobbying and money laundering rules that he may have violated. The Wall Street Journal recap was that Hunter Biden, again, he's a lawyer, he's 52, has appeared to, quote, leverage his family's name in business dealings with tycoons in Europe and China, while who were seeking to bolster their credibility at home or gain footholds in the U.S. That the activity accelerated in 2016, the last full year of his father's vice presidential term, and that these foreign tycoons stood to benefit from association with the Biden family name, while their money allowed Hunter Biden to maintain a globe-trotting lifestyle. I mean, we knew about the Burisma, this Ukrainian oil and gas company who was sitting on the board for $50,000 a month. We knew about that. But it goes on and on about some company that he was allegedly associated with that got, sweet cars and just cash payments that were rolling in, all while Hunter was allegedly peddling the Biden name. You pay me, Arthur. You get access not just to me, you get access to Linda. And Linda is the queen of Del Mar. And if you need to get into, Beluccio's, which is an amazing Bellini's, Linda can set you up, but you just got to pay. You got to pay the daughter first if you want access. So it's like that times about 10 million.
If this was a case, I'll speak of what I know. If this was a Southern District of New York case, a federal prosecutor's case here in New York City, he would definitely be being indicted. The caveat is, being the current son of the current president of the United States, they would definitely want to make sure they have all of their ducks in order. But if he was just a citizen and with the same facts, I'm representing Rudy Giuliani. They're going after Rudy Giuliani for something very similar, the Foreign Agents Registration Act. That's all they're going after Rudy for. It's just he didn't fill out a form, but it's no secret. They broke down. I didn't break down his door. He opened his door at 6 o'clock in the morning, let all the feds in, and took all his electronic devices. So they take this stuff very, very seriously. And Megyn, I looked into doing my research for Kelly's court.
Good man.
Some of the allegations, and there's a lot of tax situations. So they if a company buys you a car, that's income to you. You need to report that. It doesn't appear that happened here. They bought him an electric car called a Fisker, which, ranges from not that expensive for a car to very expensive for a car. I don't know what model he got. And there are other perks along the way and just stuff that doesn't smell right. When you're a lobbyist, and, he's allowed to be a lobbyist if he registers and goes through all of the proper channels and says, listen, yes, I do have access to the White House under the Obama administration. My dad happens to be the vice president. That does not mean anyone is going to do anything improper, unethical, illegal, et cetera, et cetera. And here are all these forms that are transparency forms, basically, so people know what I'm doing. And here's the money I'm making. And it can't be contingent on him actually achieving the goal that they want. If you do it the right way, it's not a crime. But it does not appear that he did these things the right way. Whether they'll have the guts to treat him like they would treat a typical citizen, the son of the president of the United States of America, that remains to be seen.
Okay, so now Arthur mentions this FARA and whether they're going to charge him under this. Like, was he lobbying for a foreign country and sort of peddling access? The New York Times has pointed out that Hunter Biden had a familiarity with FARA and a desire to avoid triggering it. There was at least one email in April of 2014 where Hunter Biden indicated that Burisma, again, the Ukrainian oil and gas company on whose board he sat for $50,000 a month, given his absolutely zero experience in oil and gas, I'm sure he was a great contributor, that they, quote, need to know in no uncertain terms that we will not and cannot intervene directly with domestic policymakers, and that we need to abide by FARA and any other U.S. laws in the strictest sense across the board. And to me, that just is such a classic CYA. But will it save him, Mark?
Well, that becomes a more challenging charge. How about start with the really low-hanging fruit? He makes a certain amount of money. Did he pay taxes on that money? I don't care who your father is. You either pay taxes or you didn't. Then the defense becomes, well, I was knee deep in addiction. My head was all over the place. It wasn't criminal. I thought it was being taken care of when it wasn't, which is why I hear the feds are interviewing people about when he was using drugs, what his state of mind was, because they anticipate that as a defense. The second thing, though, is this is different. Normally, we don't get to go into court and defend someone based upon the fact that this is all political. It starts off with, well, that is a fair argument to make under the circumstances. Now, whether it's true or not, who knows? So the feds really have to have a solid case, which is why I will end with how I started. Go after him for tax evasion if you've got him on that. That doesn't lie. That's not subject to argument.
On the subject of it being political, it's going to be a tough argument to make since this investigation began while his dad was the sitting vice president and then continued under a Republican administration, and now has continued while his dad is the sitting president. Like, that's going to be a tough one to make.
I don't like that part, but I don't like that, Megyn. I mean, you're a lawyer. We're former prosecutors. Like, it doesn't take 8 years to bring a case. Like, you either did it, and we may need some time to do an investigation. But why is it going on through all of these years? That doesn't sit well with me regarding how our system is working in this particular case. That's
true. But can I ask you a question about the tax evasion, Arthur? Because there are reports now, and I think he's confirmed them, that he paid $1 million to the feds in back taxes. And the reporting this week was that that was done basically to try to stave off criminal charges. Like, I was a bad boy. I was a hot mess. I fixed it. I paid what I owed. And then he had to take out a loan allegedly to pay that. Though there are reports he may be worth tens of millions of dollars, unconfirmed by us. So I don't know whether that's true. In any event, he did pay the $1 million in back taxes. So does that end it? If you had a client who came to you being charged with tax evasion, does that, as a practical matter, put it to bed?
Well, you have to cut that deal with the prosecutor, right? That's what's called prosecutorial discretion. So, of course, that's the goal I'm trying to achieve. After I sit with his accountant and a forensic accountant, and we find out, okay, yeah, he definitely owes this money. I then go in and try to use my bald head and charm and say, look, he's going to borrow money from grandma and grandpa and uncle and aunt, and he's going to pay all this money back now. Yes, he was addicted to drugs. Yes, he didn't know what he was doing. I could verify that. I have documentation about all of that. This was not an intentional act. It was a negligent act at worst, and he's got the money to pay back the government. So why don't we save everyone's time, effort, and energy? And you could audit them every year for the next decade to make sure it doesn't happen again. But let's not bring a criminal prosecution. And you pray that it works.
And as the prosecutor, I say, I love your bald head and I love your passion, but I'm not making any guarantees. And what Arthur then would still do is tell his client, listen, you owe that money anyway, pay it. And then let's hope that that'll cause them to use the prosecutorial
Can't hurt. What about, Mark, you mentioned the fact that this U.S. attorney is calling witnesses, I read this too, in front of a grand jury that's investigating this, who can speak to Hunter Biden's drug use. So why would the prosecutor looking into this be calling witnesses who can speak to his drug use in front of the grand jury as opposed to just interviewing them privately and saying, what should I be thinking about? Was he really out of control? You know what I mean? Like, why would you call them in front of the grand jury?
The direct answer is I don't know. I need to know more about their strategy, why they're doing that. But clearly they're doing it because they, one of the obvious defenses is going to be, okay, well, if I owed that money, my head was not in the right place. I'm trying to negate the mens rea, the state of mind that I intentionally chose not to pay the government money that I thought that I owed them. So I think that's going to be.
They may also be calling him in front of the grand jury. I had a case this week where someone came in and the prosecutor wants to speak to them, and I said, "You're not speaking to them." But my client really doesn't have the basis to invoke their Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination because I don't really think they've committed a crime. So you have to have a good faith basis to invoke the Fifth. You can't just do it for no reason. So I said, you want to hear what this person has to say? Put him in the grand jury and roll the dice is what they're going to say in the grand jury, but you're not speaking to them beforehand. And if they really believe this person has done nothing wrong, they may put them in the grand jury. And in a case with with these types of political implications, as a prosecutor, you want to say, look, I put it all out there and the citizens decided. But as Mark and you and I know, if they really want him indicted, they put one FBI agent in there and maybe one financial agent in there, and he's indicted in 15 minutes and the case would move on.
But I just thought of something.
Yeah.
I actually thought of something. As Arthur was speaking, we're so used to the grand jury just doing whatever the heck the feds, want, whatever the prosecutors want, and they'll indict a ham sandwich, all that. But maybe there's some grand jury in this universe, and maybe it's this one, that may not indict. And so maybe the issue needs to be brought before them that, by the way, here's his drug problem, but it did not affect. And maybe that's become an issue, or they're concerned that would become an issue. And maybe somehow they're doing that to help increase the chances of getting an indictment.
Well, the big enchilada here would be any involvement of President Biden. That's as much as we care about Hunter Biden. The question is, did Joe Biden get any of this money? Was there any cooperation? Was access provided? Right. He did have a meeting with, I think, some of these Burisma officials, which they chose not to document in the White House logs when he was vice president. So there's some smoke, though no fire yet around him. But Peter Schweitzer, who's been doing a good job on this and on all things Biden related, he's the president of the Government Accountability Institute. He says there are several things. And one of them is the probe could implicate the president, saying Hunter Biden, if he was doing these deals, and he was at precisely the same time that his father was the named point person on U.S. policy toward Ukraine, that did happen. He said, look, that's at minimum a coincidence, but if it was more directly orchestrated or producing results for Burisma, then this could become Joe Biden's problem. And they've got as their main exhibit now the infamous laptop that we were told was disinformation by 50 security officials, by the New York Times, by Politico, by every public, by NPR, I think it was, or was it PBS? One of them. It's kind of the same thing. That came out and said, we don't cover stories that are meaningless. It was NPR. We don't cover stories that are meaningless, that have absolutely no import. Meaning the laptop. The same laptop that the New York Times now acknowledges was legit. That's the basis for a lot of the FBI's investigation. That could be the basis for criminal charges. Is NPR turning around and apologizing, acknowledging its mistake? Of course not. So, Arthur, your thoughts on how, if at all, they would capture the president in this?
Well, I have to make this just a little personal. I'm going to bring it back to Rudy Giuliani. So the morning that they went to Mayor Giuliani's house, I was on the phone with him, and the subpoena was for all of his electronic devices. The warrant was for all his electronic devices. So he handed them all over. It was without any drama. And then they pick up from the mayor's home desk. They go, "What's this?" And he goes, "Oh, that is a cloned copy of Hunter Biden's laptop." It doesn't say it on there. It's not written on there. He just holds up like one of those little hard drive, and then he tells them that's what it is. And they put it down and they left it there. How do they know that there wasn't all kinds of criminality on that? I mean, he could have said that about the phone. Oh, this is Hunter Biden's phone, and put it down. So it just shows you the culture inside of law enforcement. And this was not that long ago, months ago, that they didn't want anything to do with that. Oh, Hunter Biden, we don't want anything to do with it. I mean, obviously, to Mark's point about why about a grand jury, they are in the state, the tiny state that adores the Bidens, and it would be naive to say they're not going to do their best in their subconscious not to go after the president. There would have to be such hardcore black and white connection with Biden for them to go after. Megyn, I was in court in Manhattan yesterday. There were protests in front of the Manhattan DA's office because they basically have dropped the case against President Trump. And from the little I know, but it's a little, but it's enough, there was a lot more, there was some teeth in that potential indictment than what we've heard about President Biden. So no one's really running to indict a president of the United States, past or present.
Yeah.
You would the kind of evidence that would rock your world more than that slap did. I mean, it would be like, oh my goodness, smoking gun stuff.
All right, let's shift gears to Alec Baldwin, who is just making dumb decision after dumb decision. I mean, I'm fascinated for your take on this, Vinny, because we haven't talked about it yet, but he gave that disastrous interview to ABC where he was like, I don't feel guilty. I don't feel guilty. Okay, sure. Great. You can spin it however you want. That's going to come back to haunt you. Virtually every lawyer I know predicted that. Sure enough, it did. Then came the lawsuit from Helena Hutchins' husband. She's the cinematographer he killed on set of Rust, this movie he was shooting where she was a cinematographer and he had a loaded gun in his hand, which he didn't know. He says he didn't know. I think most people would agree he didn't know. But he pointed at her and it went off and she died. So now he's being sued. And this is what Alec Baldwin, he decided to comment again. Here he is.
What you have is a certain group of people, litigants and whatever, on whatever side, who their attitude is, well, the people who likely seem negligent have no money. And the people who have money are not negligent. But we're not going to let that stop us from doing what we need to do in terms of litigation. So we have people that are suing people that they think are deep pockets litigants, where they're going to be able to, well, why sue people if you're not going to get money? That's what you're doing it for.
Your thoughts on that, Vinny?
In what world does a man who's holding a gun and points it at someone and squeezes the trigger and kills them not responsible for doing that, right? And this, we're not talking about the criminal responsibility, which is still being investigated. We're talking about simple negligence. This is gun handling 101. To me, he's saying, because I have deep pockets, I'm not negligent, but the people who were negligent don't have deep pockets. No, more than one person can be responsible. There can be contributory negligence in this. And I said from the beginning in this case, I said, there is no doubt that there is negligence here. There's no doubt there is liability here in a civil sense. To me, the whole debate was whether or not he's going to be indicted. But now he's taken it that next level, saying, "No, I'm not negligent." Really, is there some sort of shield that actors have from handling a gun that the rest of society doesn't have? For instance, if, say, someone handed me a gun and said it's not loaded, and I pointed at someone and kill him, you don't think I'm responsible for that gun? Right? So you don't get a shield for being an actor, and you don't get a shield because you're at work. Because when a trained police officer accidentally kills someone, the civil liability is automatic, and the criminal responsibility we're seeing is even there. We saw that in the case of Kim Potter.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't understand this world he's living in where he's distancing himself from the negligence. I thought he would have embraced the negligence and in order to try to distance himself from the criminal liability, which I think there's a real possibility for that as well.
How about, Robert, of course they want money. Why do you sue somebody? Why sue people if you're not going to get money? That's what you're doing it for. Why doesn't the husband of the woman you killed deserve some money? None of us has a problem with him getting money.
I mean, absolutely. And not only that, but I mean, her minor child, who now gets to grow up without a mother. I mean, clearly what Alec Baldwin did was illicit. The only question is whether just civil liability should attach or should also criminal liability should attach, because what Kim Potter was convicted of was for far less conduct than what Alec Baldwin did. He aimed the gun at a human being, cocked it back, and then pulled the trigger. Claims he didn't, but that logically doesn't hold. So he's likely lying about the fact that he pulled the trigger. So you look at those aggregate consequences. He and the production companies are absolutely civilly liable for what they did, and it's going to be a big check that they have to write. And the plaintiff's firm that is representing the husband and the young son is one of the top in the country. So Baldwin should just get his checkbook out.
Yeah, an insurance company is going to write this check, Vinny. Why is he even out there fighting a PR war that is unwinnable? All of the public sympathy is with the victim and her family.
It may be, part of a personality. When you are that public and you're a celebrity, and yes, he's been a controversial celebrity, but I think that's part of his DNA. Like you think you can talk your way out of it. We see this with other criminal defendants sometimes trying to talk their way out of it. And it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work. To me, it's a case of where a little bit of knowledge is dangerous, right? Alec Baldwin is obviously intelligent, right? This has been the center of his life. So he understands a little bit about the law and the way it works. But that little bit of knowledge, is turned into a dangerous public relations disaster. But now some of these things he's saying may end up in a courtroom and will be used against him. And I don't think making statements like that in any way set things up better for his criminal liability either, because you've got a DA who, I think this is really a call for the DA to make. Should I or should I not go forward with prosecuting this case? And you keep saying things like this, it could get under her skin, and she may just file those criminal charges.
I should tell our audience that Robert went back to his court hearing. I guess he's doing it via Zoom, thankfully for us, because he can pop into our court. He can go into real court. This is kind of fun. Now we can debunk all of his points while he's gone. Vinny, why do you think that he's actually facing the real potential of criminal charges in this case? Because, a lot of lawyers have poo-pooed that.
Yeah, I would not poo-poo that. And again, one analogy I use a lot is take it out of the context of a movie set. And, there's no way there would not be some level of criminal responsibility. Also coming off of the Kim Potter case. I make that comparison all the time. Here's someone who thought she had one weapon in her hand and had the wrong weapon. Well, he thought he had an unloaded gun in his hand, but he had a loaded gun. Now, whose fault is it? Well, guess what? Someone hands you a gun and you can have expert after expert after expert come in and say the way it's supposed to happen. That gun is supposed to be checked. If he's not going to personally check it, it should be checked in front of him. So if the armorer or whoever is going to say, this is not a loaded weapon, that check of the weapon should be done in front of him so he can eyeball it himself. That is the industry norm. And he deviated from the industry norm.
For those of you living under a rock, Will Smith slapped presenter Chris Rock at the Oscars a couple of nights ago because Chris Rock made a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith having her head shaved. She has no hair. And he said, you're looking good for G.I. Jane 2, something like that, because G.I. Jane was a movie with Demi Moore and she shaved her head to become part of the armed services. Anyway, Will Smith takes the stage. He slaps Chris Rock unprovoked. And then he sits back down in the audience and he yells, keep my wife's name out of your effing mouth. Nobody did anything. Will Smith won Best Actor. He was celebrated the whole night long. He wound up not apologizing to Chris Rock that night, but to the Academy. Since then, he said he's apologizing to Chris as well. He's a work in progress. He's trying to do better. Good job, PR people. That was a better statement. And now there's a real question about whether the LAPD, I guess it would be, should file charges against him, even though Chris Rock says he doesn't want that. He's not filing charges or asking for criminal charges. Mark, what do you make of it?
Okay, so let me start off with when I woke up and I read that Chris Rock declined charges to be filed, I was upset. I really wanted Smith to pay for it. Then my position kind of changed. Again, this is personally. I'll go legally in a second. When I saw his apology, he hit every note he needed to hit in that apology, whether he wrote it or his publicist wrote it, or they wrote it together. He said what needed to be said to get me off the ledge. I'm now calm, saying that violence of any kind is poisonous and that his actions were unacceptable, because I was most concerned about people looking at this A-list actor and thinking that now we're going back to the 1800s where we're going to have duels to the death, and that shows our romantic sides to our wives. Forget it. That's ridiculous. But I think from a legal perspective, you don't bring charges. I don't know if the prosecution can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. I think that any reasonable hypothesis, like potentially Chris Rock believing that this was acceptable touching, maybe not in the moment, but it wasn't against his will. It wasn't unlawful. He would need to state that for this to be a provable case.
Really? I don't know. We see that all the time, don't we, Arthur, in like domestic violence cases where the woman won't cooperate and they're like...
This is Holly weird. It's a little different, Megyn.
I know, but there's...
But Megyn, you're
that's
right.
part of why they might charge him. Go ahead, Arthur.
But you're correct. It is most typical in domestic violence cases where you have a victim who is so under the control of her assailants and usually dependent, whether that's financially dependent, childcare dependent, emotionally dependent, that they don't have the courage to come forward. So law enforcement, if they have the evidence, so if they've seen it or if it's on tape and they can bring the charges, they will bring the charges, what's called sua sponte, meaning all on their own. But it's not typical in like a street fight. If cops roll up on the scene and two guys just had a fight, and no one's asking for the other to get arrested, it's not typical for a police officer unless someone is really badly beaten. And here, Mark, I understand what you're saying, but I don't know the depth of their relationship because I keep hearing mixed messages about Chris Rock and Will Smith and how close they are or aren't. But, if one of my buddies, I MC a lot of these things, right? And I rag on people. And if one of my buddies came up and whacked me, I don't think I would want the police to be involved. I'd want to work it out between the two. Now, of course, there's not hundreds of millions of people, tens of millions of people watching. So, I don't know if this is a police intervention. I will tell you what my takeaway was, and I agree with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who wrote a real rough article about it, is it really hurt the Black community and the image of the Black community that they're fighting and have been fighting so hard to change the narrative. And I can relate to that as an Italian American, in this 50s and 60s and 70s, when, a lot of people, including my immediate family, to raise the level of what people think of Italians. And then movies like Rocky Balboa and Vinnie Barbarino and Welcome Back Kotter and Casino, they just enhance that whole image. Oh, all Italians are this and that. And, I can tell you the Black community is really disappointed that Will Smith, and you have a black on black man. It really hurt their mission.
I didn't look at it that way. And again, this might be me, and I know that there's others who see it differently. But what I saw, and I think most people saw too, is that hurt people hurt people.
I didn't see that. No,
Will Smith is deeply hurt. You can just see he's troubled.
He was laughing, Mark. He was laughing at the joke. Did you see him hysterically laughing at the joke before his wife got upset?
Arthur, this goes back way before the joke. It's not about the joke. Someone who's going up on stage and smacking him under these terms and conditions, there's a history here. And it also shows you what he's going through, the pain and what kind of hurt is inside, what he's going through. That all
his wife had an affair because they had an open marriage and his wife went and had an affair.
By the way, if it's an open marriage, it's not an affair, right? It's right. She too is polyamorous from the sound of it. Like the daughter, again, into more intimate relationships with more than one partner at a time. But listen, if it's an open marriage, and listen, there are all sorts of speculation about whether it's an open marriage on both sides and what his preferences are and so on. Who the hell knows what's going on in their private marriage? But I didn't see somebody who was dealing with personal pain, Mark. I saw somebody who wanted to look like a tough guy, who saw an opportunity to look like a tough guy. Okay, we can go back, I guess through every decade of his life and say, well, what made him want to act like a tough guy? Who made him feel less than a tough guy, that he felt the need to go up in there and act like that? Okay, I don't care. I really don't care. I don't care why the prisoners who go to prison do it, and I don't care why Will Smith did it. I just feel like, all right, he did something bad, and he should be held to account. They shouldn't take away his Oscar. But I'd like to see some punishment, something with teeth, because it was bullshit. And I continue to look at poor Chris Rock, who was totally humiliated. And I know people don't look at him like, oh, he's humiliated. He's a weakling. But you tell me, guys, isn't that how you'd feel? You'd feel humiliated if somebody like that got up. Will Smith, of all people, one of the biggest stars on earth, smacks you. You don't smack back. You don't even know what to do. And everyone's looking at it.
Yeah, here's my biggest problem with it. We haven't heard yet from Chris, and there's a reason why. Maybe once again, he's coming to Florida here. I've got tickets for his concert. He wants to sell it out. Maybe he doesn't want to say anything. But the problem is, so many of the reports led people to believe, I think erroneously, that he knew of her condition and then chose to make that joke. I'm fairly certain he didn't. And if he didn't, then it's just an honest mistake. That's the problem.
Even if he did know, it does make the joke, a little bit more of a prick joke, but it doesn't excuse what Will Smith did.
It doesn't rise to the level he gets smacked. And here are two things, Mark. He sold more tickets to his shows yesterday than he did the whole month before. So, and Megyn, he was humiliated for 5 minutes, but pretty soon thereafter, when he got up there, Will Smith, and he's hysterically crying, the narrative changed. Like, he was the man who was the gentleman, who showed class, who showed dignity, and he's coming out by all accounts as he was the hero. The other thing that to your point about Will being just a bully, people who I've spoken to in Hollywood, Chris Rock is a relatively slight man physically. He's not known as a tough guy at all. If that was Woody Harrelson up there, or Samuel L. Jackson, or someone who could kick Will's butt back and really push back,
or like The Rock. Can you imagine if it were The Rock?
Right.
He wouldn't have gotten up there and done that to The Rock.
No, of course not. I mean, maybe he would have screamed. And, as horrible as the smack was, when he screamed, especially the second time from the seats, he was absolutely unhinged, like spit flying out of his mouth. And I agree with you. There should be some form of discipline. The last words of his statement was, "I hope the Academy invites me back." I see nothing wrong at all with them saying, you can be nominated for the work you do as an actor, but no, you have lost your privilege, at least for a period of time, to come back here and attend this award show.
Well, they'd be insane to do that.
Are you condoning his arrest? You're not suggesting he should be arrested in spite of
no, not at all.
I'm not
saying, but I'm condoning he should be thrown out of coming back to that award show.
No, listen, first of all,
anyone else,
I don't think he should be
would have been arrested.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyone else would have been arrested. But Megyn, if it was a non-celebrity. If it was a non-celebrity who went up and smacked Chris Tucker, they would have been arrested on the spot. Security would have ran on the stage and they would have ran on the stage and arrested him right there and then.
Okay, but I have to say the Academy's insane if they don't invite him back next year, because their ratings have been plummeting. They used to get 40 million. Now they get 10 million last year. This year they got 15 million. I guarantee you, that was in part because last year was COVID and the movies hadn't been made and so on. But they got a bump for sure out of this. What happened to me probably happened to millions of people, where I got a text from a friend saying, "Oh my God, did you see what just happened?" And then you tune in and they get the ratings bounce if you happen to have a Nielsen box.
The numbers went up 550. The numbers went up 550,000. 500,000 people immediately got that text.
Yeah, so they got 15 million. Wait, let me finish my point. So they got 15 million. So next year everybody's going to tune in if he's there, waiting to see whether he does something else. I mean, he won't, but you got to see him sitting in the audience next year. You would tune in just to see that. I don't know.
Judge Kelly, how do you punish him? You said you want something with teeth. So what's the teeth that you punish Will Smith with?
Let's see, like I don't know. You can't mandate a donation. That's what I'd like to see, like a hefty donation
hurt him.
to a worthy cause. Well, it would if we made it big enough. 10 million hurts everybody. That's like, unless you're Jeff Bezos, you feel that. It's a negotiated deal where he has to make a donation to a worthy cause that, like helping impoverished children, whatever it is, but something to make him pay.
Anger management programs.
Johnny Depp and actress Amber Heard once described their relationship as, quote, intensely passionate, at times volatile, but always bound by love. That was their divorce announcement. It's always love until you wind up in court suing each other for tens of millions of dollars. Johnny Depp wants $50 million from his now ex-wife, claiming that she defamed him when in 2018 she wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post portraying herself as a victim of domestic abuse. She did not name him, but it was clear the implication, so he alleges. In return, Amber Heard has now countersued Johnny Depp for $100 million, and the case opened this week. It's underway right now. We have the latest highlights from it, or lowlights, depending on your POV. So who is likely to prevail in this celebrity showdown? Joining me now, criminal defense attorney Jana Spilbor and trial attorney Ann Bremner. Ladies, welcome. So I spent way too much time preparing for this particular segment of today's show. I was listening to various podcasts of people who've been following this thing very closely, and what I've determined is there's no one left to root for. These are both obviously deeply troubled, narcissistic, deranged people. I mean, that's just clear. And I personally have no desire to see either one in a movie or television show ever again. But as for who abused whom, I'm not sure. And I've heard people say maybe he was getting a raw deal by newspapers who refused to acknowledge alleged abuse she heaped on him. And other people I know and trust saying she was the victim, he's the horror. And we'll see. But that's really what's at the heart of the defamation case, because truth is an absolute defense to any defamation claims. So if she can prove he really is an abuser who abused her, she's going to win. And if he can prove she was the abuser, I was the victim, and that this was a lie she made up to try to portray herself as this victim and then women's rights advocate, and she ruined my career in the process, he's going to win. Jana, what do you make? They did opening statements on Tuesday. They both have top-notch lawyers, and it's a fierce battle already. How's it going, and how do you see the case?
So let me just say this. You have spent a lot of time preparing for today's segment. I actually stayed home from work and watched the trial yesterday from 9 to 5.
God bless
because
you.
I couldn't stop. Now, listen, here's the thing. Nobody is going to win this case. And I don't mean there won't be a verdict for one side or the other. There will be. But right now, they are both losers, because what we are hearing as the public consuming this is a lot of dirty laundry, a lot of personal stuff that we really didn't need to hear. And can I just say this for a minute? I know that Amber Heard wrote the op-ed, but if it weren't at the heart of this lawsuit, I probably would have easily forgotten that she wrote the op-ed. I'm not saying it wasn't important, but in terms of ruining or affecting Johnny Depp's career, had he let it go, he probably will be better off than he's going to be, even if he wins this trial. That's my convoluted opinion.
All right, and what do you? I mean, I see the point, because PR-wise has been a nightmare. But this comes on the heels of another trial, so I don't know that Johnny Depp has much downside at this point, because he sued this newspaper for claiming he was an abuser. He sued them for defamation, and he lost. He lost that trial, which these jurors will never know. They will not be told about that. They may have heard about it prior to today. They would have screened for that on voir dire. But he already lost this. Then he tried to appeal. The appeal was denied. And then Amber, she made the allegation separately and directly in the Washington Post. And now he's like, all right, now I'm going to come after you. I don't like my results. That was a BS verdict, he thinks. And he's like, let's go again.
Right. It's like, game on for him. He's like, she gave him a perfect opportunity. And, it's defamation by implication. She didn't name him, but who else would it be, except for Johnny Depp, who's the abuser, and she's been victimized and vilified and attacked by, trolls and people in the comment sections and everything else. So she gets out there and says, I'm this huge victim. It's a perfect comeback for him, I think, because, and I've heard that at the trial, he's got legions of female fans. When he walks in the courtroom, they're all at Twitter and they love him. And I know it's a mostly male jury, but the fact is that he's got a fan base. He lost out on a major enterprise that's been playing Jack Sparrow because of what happened with the case with the Sun. So it's like getting 2 bites of the apple. It's like a second chance to basically come in the United States and show that he is not a wife beater. And he's got some pretty good evidence against her, including her on tape, allegedly admitting that she'd hit him. It was a total dysfunctional relationship, as you said, a couple of narcissists and now 2 scorpions circling and trying to sting each other in a courtroom.
Mm-hmm. So, Jana, on her side, let's talk about what she's got going on her side that may suggest he abused her. As I understand it, she went in and filed for divorce, and that it emerged that she came out, let me get the dates, May 23, 2016. She filed for divorce after 15 months of marriage. 4 days later, a judge issued a TRO against Johnny Depp over domestic violence allegations. That doesn't mean he did it. It's very easy for somebody to go in there and say, I was abused. Here's a bruise. Give me a TRO. Most judges will give it to you. That doesn't mean it actually happened. But there are pictures of her alleged injuries that appear in the tabloids at the time. The LAPD, PS, finds no evidence of a crime. But the question is, did he beat her? Because there are pictures of her looking like she has injuries. His lawyers at the last trial are saying she faked that. We're showing the picture if you want to check it out on YouTube later. That this is a fake injury, that, or at least he didn't cause it, because she intentionally walked out the front of the LA courthouse that day she filed for divorce. Now, I mean, even at my level of being a public figure, you don't have to walk in and out the front door of the courthouse. When you're Amber Heard, right, you really don't have to use the front door. She clearly wanted to be photographed. And They had a witness yesterday by the last name Buka, who was a friend of Johnny Depp since childhood, but he said he became Amber's friend as well, who said, I saw her after the alleged incident that she said led to that bruise, and there was nothing on her face. We actually have this soundbite. It's number 2. Take a listen.
As I'm walking back, I say to Amber, as I'm walking up, he hit you? And she goes, yeah, he threw a phone at me and hit me. And I'm looking, because I had just seen her 2 feet away, and I'm going, where? And she puts her head out. She puts her face out like that for me to look at her, the right side of her face. And I'm looking, but at that point also, I'm looking, and I turn around, get on the other side. We're in the doorway. So I'm on this side with the light shining this way from the doorway with the lights above, but the sunshine. And she's got her face out like this, looking, to show me. And I'm looking, and I inspect her face. I'm looking at her forehead. I'm looking at the side of her eye. I'm looking at her cheek. I'm looking at her chin. I'm looking at the other side of the face. I'm looking at the whole thing. And I don't see anything. I don't see anything I don't see a cut, a bruise, swelling, redness. It's just Amber's face.
What do you make of it?
Well, first of all, this guy's going to get his own show when this trial is over. He is the reason I was glued to the TV yesterday. But listen, he comes across as a very credible witness. Yes, he's been a friend of Johnny Depp since they were kids. I get that. And yes, he's being called by Johnny Depp's camp. But he seems just kind of like this palooka who doesn't know much about makeup because they grilled him about makeup and blush with different mascara, blah, blah, all day yesterday. And he's saying, look, I was around them all the time. She tried to point out an injury to me. I looked as hard as I could. I did not see one. But he comes across as credible. So that's going to be an interesting set of facts for this jury to debate. And it will come down to those injuries. Really, that's the main thing. Did Johnny Depp, A, did she cause her own injury? Was she actually injured? And B, if so, did Johnny Depp do it? That's really the crux of this case.
Because are there other alleged incidents of physical abuse she's alleging, or is that the main one?
That's the main one from her. Now, let's keep in mind that Johnny Depp is actually alleging that she's committed physical abuse against him. Neither one of these people look good in this endeavor, but that's the one that started this whole thing.
That guy we just played, to your point, he was asked on cross-examination whether he kissed her multiple times on the cheek when he saw her at the door. He said, no, I'm not European. I'm from Brooklyn. Love that. Back to Ghislaine. Lise, you tell me whether they've got an uphill battle, because when I listened to the testimonial of Jane, the first alleged victim, we didn't listen because there's no cameras or video audio in the courtroom, but we read the account. It was very moving, but then of course the defense gets up and it's less so.
Now, I think she's not the only one. Jane's not the only one that's going to testify. You've got at least four victims that are going to come forward and say, look, it wasn't just Epstein. It was that she got us involved. And it's the worst kind of enabling. I mean, it's criminal enabling, if you will. I mean, just think about these young girls as young as 14. She coddles up to them. She takes them out shopping, asks about their lives. If they come from a troubled past, and they're even better prey. I mean, it's really, talk about despicable. We talked about despicable in the last case. This is despicable plus. I mean, the fact that she would just bring these women in, and then not only did she hand them over to him, but she would engage in some of these orgies and things like that. And the jury's going to hear more of that testimony in the coming days. I think it's going to be absolutely devastating to her case.
So, Jonna, so far we've heard from the pilot of the so-called Lolita Express, Jeffrey's private plane, and the pilot was basically like, I never saw anything. The cockpit door was closed. Never. But he's been paid very handsomely over the years by Jeffrey Epstein. Although, so far we've heard a lot of big names, like Bill Clinton was on the jet, and Donald Trump before he was president. Prince Andrew was on the jet. All these, you're like, Kevin Spacey. some with their own problems. So it's like, that's not good. But anyway, Jane gets up there and says Ghislaine and Jeffrey met her while she was at her damn summer camp. She was a 14-year-old in Michigan at singing and acting camp. And they were up there for some reason, walking by, took a shining to her, get her name. Turns out she's from Palm Beach as well, Jane, a pseudonym. And when she goes back home, they call her and her mother, and Jeffrey Epstein does the oldest. According to Jane, I'll make you a star. I know, everyone in the business, but you've got to be ready. You've got to be ready. The next thing she knows, he's pulling his pants down. She says she's never even seen a man naked before and abusing her. And that Ghislaine was part of it, was actually in the room abusing for part of it. But then when the defense got up there, they started poking holes in her memory. This is 1994. It's been a long time. She's 41 years old now.
Yeah, guys, I got to tell you, I have really strong opinions about this case, and probably opinions that are unpopular with the masses, because I know the allegations are salacious, right? I would never defend a sex trafficker. But what I feel I am doing in this case, and I've studied it from the day that she was arrested back in July of 2020. And the first thing that made my fine hairs go up was the fact that they would not release this woman on bail when every other high profile, high net worth defendant of late does get bail. Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein, Steve Bannon, Lori Loughlin, people who could equally have flown the coop, given bail, they got bail. Something just told me this wasn't right. And I am in the camp of the defense here is basically going to say, hey, wait a minute. These charges, as salacious and awful as they sound, were invented after Jeffrey Epstein, who is the real target, died. And you can't just defendants are not fungible. You can't replace one with another when something happens to the main person who they never really got to take to task. And that was Jeffrey Epstein. Now, he was taken to task a little bit back in 2008. Why weren't any of these charges brought up back then? Why weren't they brought up in the 90s? Why weren't they brought up in the early 2000s?
Because he was connected. He was connected. He was on the plane. He was good friends with Prince Andrew. He went to Prince Andrew's, Princess Beatrice is his daughter. He went to her 18th birthday. I don't know if it's true, but the Queen was there. This is Jeffrey Epstein. He's hanging out with guys from MIT. He was hanging out with Bill Clinton, former presidents. People. He was connected. That's why he got a slap on the wrist back in 2008.
And just to answer Jonna's point, she has a French and American passport, both passports. So she's a flight risk. And that's why she didn't get bail. Nothing more than that.
Give all those up, $30 million and her passports, and she still got denied 6 times.
And Epstein, when he was charged his last time before he died, was charged with co-conspirators, unnamed. She's one of the co-conspirators. So they had this in mind. The prosecution had this in mind way before Epstein's untimely death. I mean, it's not that she's a scapegoat. She was absolutely involved. It reminds me of, remember Allison Mack in the Keith Rainier trial, the NXIVM trial a couple of years ago in New York?
She was the actress.
And Allison Mack, I think was she on Smallville or something like that? But anyway, she was convicted. I think she got 3 years for her aid with Keith Rainier in exactly doing the same kind of thing that's going on here. She was grooming these women. Look, if Jeffrey Epstein, with all his connections, whatever, comes up to you and you're 14 years old, you may run away. If she comes up to you and she's nice and sweet and speaks French or whatever. I mean, I'm making this up, but
no, but it's true. And she was an internationally connected person. Her dad, he died on some yacht. He was allegedly a spy. Some people believe she may have been some sort of a spy. I mean, the whole thing's full of intrigue. But when I looked at the cross-examination yesterday of Jane, whose direct testimony was very compelling, the defense was pointing out Jane is now a professional actress. Jane acts on a soap opera. And they were basically saying, you've had a long career in acting, haven't you? The defense attorney, Laura Menninger. There's no melodramatic role you haven't played, is there? Can you cry on command? Jane said, that's not really how it works. Melissa Francis, my pal who used to star on Little House on the Prairie, would disagree. She's very proud of her ability to produce the waterworks on demand. Her kids will fake cry to her and she'd be like, oh, please. If I don't see a tear, I'm not listening. Then the defense got up there and pointed out, and this has been the case with a lot of the Epstein accusers, who have accused, a slew of men, not just Epstein. She apparently told law enforcement agents, She wasn't sure if Ghislaine Maxwell ever actually touched her. She didn't remember Ghislaine Maxwell ever being present for any sexual activity between her and Epstein. She repeatedly said, Jane did, that she didn't recall if she had actually said that to investigators. But this is what the defense is going to do over and over, because none of these victims is, quote, a perfect victim. And they have a lot of conflicting prior testimony.
And this case and similar cases often come down to one thing, and that is the credibility of the accusers. And why is that? Because a lot of these crimes, obviously, they don't happen in front of people, right? So it lends itself to that. So it's very important, and actually probably the most difficult part of a defense attorney's job, because nobody wants to attack somebody who claims to be a victim. But on the other hand, if they are truly not victims, I'm saying what if, you guys, take Ghislaine Maxwell, take Jeffrey Epstein, take the big names out of it for a second. What if, and what stops people in the accuser's positions from inventing facts for some other gain? I'm not saying it's happening here. I'm saying it's possible.
But there is a pot of money, Jana. There is a pot of money.
There's a ton of money, right? And that was my next point. When you are incentivized by millions and millions of dollars, and all of these accusers put their hand out, and they got between $1 and $5 million from the Jeffrey Epstein fund, which eventually ran out of money because 135 people made claims to that fund. They paid out over $125 million. I would love to know what the criteria was for that, but that's an aside. When you have that kind of incentive, you can adopt and really believe what your story becomes. And that's dangerous, not just in the Ghislaine Maxwell case. It's dangerous in any case where anybody points a finger and says, this happened to me under the cover of darkness with nobody else in the room, but it's a crime and I want my pound of flesh. That's what scares me.